Shabbat Shalom. Hava, Hava Nashira, Shir Hallelujah, Shir Hallelujah. Hava, Hava Nashira, Shir Hallelujah, Shir Hallelujah.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
It is so wonderful to be together this evening. Tonight, we come together in celebration of the words and message of the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose message of peace and unity are just as powerful today as they ever were. This evening, we are greatly privileged to welcome Pastor Richard Gibson from Elizabeth Baptist Church in Slavic Village. We also welcome those from Elizabeth Baptist Church who are streaming with us this evening. Welcome. This church not only provides a holy space for worship, but it is also a shelter for homeless women and children and is a leader of social justice issues. We are so honored to have all of you with us here this evening. We continue and welcome the Shabbat together. Join us.
Just echo. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Peace for everyone. Peace for everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Rabbi, let's have everyone sing a little Hine Matov with us.
Amen.
This might be a new Hine Matov, but I think you'll catch on. Ready?
Hine Matov umanayim sheverachim gam yachad. 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 How good it is, how good it is, how sweet it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. How good it is, how good it is, how sweet it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. Hine Matov umanayim sheverachim gam yachad. 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 Let me hear you from Slavic Village. How good it is, how good it is, how sweet it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. How good it is, how good it is, how sweet it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. Shalom Aleichem, Salam Aleikum. Shalom Aleichem, Salam Aleikum. Shalom Aleichem, Salam Aleikum. Shalom Aleichem, Salam Aleikum. Hine Matov umanayim sheverachim gam yachad. Hine Matov umanayim sheverachim gam yachad. Sheverachim gam yachad. Sheverachim gam yachad. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharim, Malachei Elyon. Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bochem leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Marchuni leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Setchem leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. At this time, as we bring in the Shabbat, I invite Pastor Gibson to please light our Shabbat candles for us.
in the light.
Hatred paralyzes life. Love releases it. Hatred confuses life. Love harmonizes it. Hatred darkens life. Love illuminates it. Those were the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. On Shabbat, we celebrate sacred time. We welcome our holy day as a time to reflect, to rejuvenate, and think about the work we still have to do in order to repair our world. As we enter this sacred time and this sacred space, wherever you may be, we enter as one and bring in the holiness together. Lecha Dodi compares Shabbat to a bride on her wedding day, celebrating a unity. Let us celebrate unity tonight as one. We continue on page 20 in your Sidurim. You to please rise if you are able.
Boi v'shalom, ateret bala, gam b'simcha ובצולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי
You may be seated. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. I have also decided to stick with love, for I know that love is ultimately the only answer to humankind's problems. And I'm going to talk about it everywhere I go. I know it isn't popular to talk about it in some circles today, and I'm not talking about emotional bosh when I talk about love. I'm talking about a strong, demanding love." As we prepare for the Shema and the Ve'ahavta, we are told to love our God with all of our heart, soul, and might. Loving our God does not just happen with worship, but with honoring and loving all of God's people. As we prepare for our most sacred prayer in Judaism, the Shema, we're reminded to listen to the values we speak of, to listen to the voices of friends, neighbors, even strangers, to listen so that we may bridge peace and love and create love in our world.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, וחיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, וחיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Shabbat Shalom, Everyone, again, welcome. Pastor Gibson, thank you so much for being with us. Welcome to all of our guests. Thank you for being with us, and a special thank you to the members of the Racial Justice Task Force and all of those who have made this service possible. This Shabbat B'Shalach, we read about the children of Israel at this moment of the crossing of the sea. The children of Israel standing on the other side of Egypt, looking at the Egyptian forces being swallowed by the sea and singing their redemption. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. wrote in his sermon, "The Death of Evil upon the Seashore," when the children of Israel were held under the gripping yoke of Egyptian slavery, Egypt symbolized evil in the form of humiliating oppression, ungodly exploitation, and crushing domination. The Israelites symbolized goodness in the form of devotion and dedication to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, and Rebekah, and Leah, and Rachel. Egypt struggled to maintain her oppressive yoke, and Israel struggled to gain freedom. Pharaoh stubbornly refused to respond to the cry of Moses, even when plague after plague threatened his domain. This tells us something about evil that we must never forget. Namely, that evil is recalcitrant and determined and never voluntarily relinquishes its hold, short of a persistent, almost fanatical resistance. When the Israelites looked back at the sea and saw the Egyptians drowning, all they could see was here and there a poor drowned body beaten up upon the seashore. For the Israelites, this was a great moment. It was the end of a frightful period in their history. It was a joyous daybreak that had come to end the long night of their captivity. Something in this universe justifies Shakespeare in saying, "There's a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will," and Lowell in saying, "Though the cause of evil prosper, yet 'tis truth alone is strong," and Tennyson in saying, "I can but trust the good shall fall at last, far off, at last to all, and every winter change to spring." In our winter, we pray for spring. We turn to the Mi Chamocha.
Who is like you, Adonai? Who is like you, Adonai? Ya na na na, ya na 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 na.
We turn to page 43. Please join me at the top of the page. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, hapores sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Please rise with us for the Amidah.
People get ready, there's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the diesels humming. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord. People get ready, there's a train to Jordan, picking up passengers from coast to coast. Faith is key, open the doors and board 'em. There's hope for all the loved most. There ain't no room for the hopeless sinner who would hurt all people just to save his own. Have pity on those whose choices grow thinner, so there's no hiding place from the kingdom's throne. Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora, El Elyon, Gamel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot V'imahot, U'mevii Geula Livnei Vanechem L'ma'an Shemo, V'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham V'ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Maranai, Mechayecha Kol Atah, Rav Lichoshia, Mashiv HaRuach U'Morit HaGashem, Mechakel Chayim B'Chesed, Mechayecha Kol B'Rachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim V'Rofech Olim, U'Matir Asurim, U'Mekayem Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Michamolcha Ba'al Gevurot, U'Midol Melech, Melech Meimit U'Mechaye, U'Matzmiach Yeshua, V'Ne'eman Natal HaChayot HaKol, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mechaye HaKol.
We, in a moment, turn to the Shalom Rav. The Shalom Rav, this prayer for great peace, is a prayer that is directed to Adon Kol HaShalom, that force that represents mastery of all peace. That's what our liturgy says. And on this weekend, on this Shabbat, at this time in our lives, while we may not be able to conceive of great peace, overarching peace, all peace, we pray for just a little more.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael amach tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amach tasim leolam. Ki atah hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki atah hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amach tasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael amach tasim leolam. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. תשים
continue silently.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Oh, say shalom. Bimarama, huya aseh. Shalom Aleinu. V'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei Tel, v'imru amen. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
At this time, it is my privilege to invite Pastor Gibson to share some words with us.
Good evening, and thank you for the invitation to be here this evening. This is an incredibly beautiful place. I am comfortable. Thank you for Rabbi Cohen and Rabbi Dadoon for the invitation and to making me comfortable with the music. There's no one like Adonai. As I could actually hear that over and over again, and I feel like I'm right at home. And for those who are not here, and if you've never been to Temple-Tifereth, it is absolutely beautiful. It is absolutely beautiful and a pleasure to be here today. So thank you for the invitation. Thank you for honoring the legacy of Dr. King. Thank you also for To Be Shabbat and really connecting this state to trees and the environment and our nature. Also, thank you for being a temple that is welcoming to many families, blended families. As was not a coincidence, I spoke to someone this week who is thinking about becoming part of your family here. And she specifically talked about that because she said that you are welcoming to blended families. So thank you for that approach. I also appreciate how you're practical and principled in your approach to the community. And we're grateful, again, to have this opportunity. I also felt welcomed in our discussions leading up to today, and I felt welcomed by the email today and the calls. And so, again, I'm very comfortable here today. So having said all that, I have to confess that I always, with some reluctance, accept engagements around MLK Day. In fact, for the last few years, I have not accepted any invitations to speak around MLK Day. So similarly, in our tradition, there's a tradition that we have called the 7 Last Words. I've not accepted traditions there, in part because as I reflect upon the life of Dr. King, and I think about his incredible work, it seems sometimes a bit disingenuous for me to honor his rhetoric as kind of a monument, but not to think deeply about what we face before us. And so actually, this is the first MLK invitation that I've accepted in years. And so what has happened recently is I actually usually would not get back to people often rather than saying no. So I appreciate the invitation, and the nudge. And so I want to begin with this proposition. I believe, and for me it's not a proposition, that we are in a time of civil war. Now, for Rabbi Cohen, who is a veteran, I would acknowledge that your thoughts of war are much deeper than mine. But as I think about what's going on in our country, again, I think that we are in a time of intense civil war. And so I would argue that war is characterized not only by gunfire and weaponry, but it's also characterized by the staging of troops. And I believe that war flows from intense tension that is intended to either destroy or defeat the enemy. And I believe that in our country right now, the tension is so intense that it's intended to destroy or defeat the enemy. And so I believe that there are elements of war that exist in our communities, in our country, and I just want to talk about those elements for a few moments. I believe that the war that is being waged might not be viewed as conventional war, but it is nonetheless war. And I believe that we are in an intense time of war. And so one only needs to look at recent events in this country. So if we think about the Supreme Court coming together this weekend, there were Supreme Court justices, some who decided to wear masks and one who decided not to wear a mask, and there was another one who decided to be remote. For me, that's evidence of war. As I think about one senator who was reflecting upon the voting rights legislation and expressed her dismay about there not being success, the way in which she described it, she said that our country is afflicted with the disease of division. And I believe that we certainly are afflicted with the disease of division. And so as we think about what's going on, I'd like to press further into this thought of being in war. So Aeschylus, who was the Greek tragedy writer, he once wrote that when war begins, then the first casualty of war is truth. When war begins, the first casualty of war is truth. I would have a parallel to that. When war begins, love is conspicuously absent. Let me say that again. When war begins, love is conspicuously absent. So we might not see all of the weaponry that we might see in a conventional war, but there's evidence absolutely of war. It says, I think about coming together, and thank you for allowing me to light the candles. Because as I came here today, I'm thinking about in our tradition, in Genesis, the first chapter, and I believe it's the third verse, Adonai says, let there be light, and there was light. And for me today, coming together today is a moment of light. It's a moment of light that I hope will permeate our community in a time of great need. And so during this time, let me highlight some facts of this time. I said that there's an absence of truth when war begins, but we can never ignore the facts in our community. And let me just highlight some of the facts or truths that I believe that Dr. King would focus on in this moment. So as I think about our country, as I think about what's going on in our country, in the city of Cleveland, as of yesterday, there were 30 gun shootings. And as we think about the gun shootings and the violence in our communities across this country, for me, that is evidence of war. As I think about the fact that there were, in 2020, 193 homicides. And in 2021, 170 homicides. Two of the highest years since 1982. For me, that is evidence of war. As I think about our school system, and our school system, the Cleveland Municipal School District, which has a graduation rate which is increasing, and it's just above 80%. But there's another figure that is particularly important. There is this measure called the achievement rate. And the achievement rate is really the rate that you can measure schools across districts. And if you look at the Cleveland Municipal School District, the achievement rate is 38% on a scale of 120. And so when I look at the neglect, I look at the achievement of our children, I would contend that we are at war. As I look at the infant and maternal mortality rate in the city of Cleveland and in Cuyahoga County, as I think about the genocide that we see throughout the Bible, and we see that for African American women, the infant mortality rate is 14.6%, higher than some third world countries. I would contend that we are at war. As I think about our children who are exposed to lead in the city of Cleveland, the estimates say that over 25% of our children in the city of Cleveland are exposed to unhealthy lead, and during the pandemic, testing went down, so we really don't have a firm grasp on that front of the war. As I think about in the city of Cleveland, 36% of African Americans or blacks are homeowners compared to an average of 75%. When I look at that, I say we are absolutely at war. When I think about income levels in our country, and the income levels for African Americans can be roughly half that of the average in our country, we are still at war in this country. And so part of the challenge for me as I think about Martin Luther King and his death in 1968, and this is part of the reason why I have not taken invitations to speak on Martin Luther King Day, I wonder, why aren't we further ahead? Why have we not had much success? And Martin Luther King Day for me is not necessarily a day of celebration. It's a day of wonder. It's a day of concern. It is a day of sadness, honestly. It is a day of sadness because I think that in this country especially, we should have had much more progress. As I think about the facts of this city, so before the pandemic, we were the second poorest city, large city in the country. We had the highest digital divide in the country, and so our children who were at a deficit going into it, that deficit increased. And for me, that is a sign of war. In Cuyahoga County, we incarcerate more people in our county than any other county in the state. Ohio is number 5 on the list of states of incarceration. Let me give you the list. So number 1, in terms of states that incarcerate, Texas, California, 2nd, Florida is 3rd, Georgia is 4th, and we are 5th. How is it that we can be ahead of New York and Illinois? And so when I think about it, we are absolutely at war. We are absolutely at war in our community, in Cuyahoga County, and in Cleveland. As I look at what's going on, as I think about the casualties of war, it's a sad commentary that as we look at the wealth and income gaps in our country, that they persist and that they've gotten worse during the pandemic. And so those are some of the facts. But let me speak more specifically to the things that I see as I walk the journey in the city. So I have young people who come to me and say, Pastor, I can go and get a gun within 15 minutes, and it will cost less than $100. And I can get as many guns as I want. And I get the guns not because I am trying to hurt someone or to rob someone, but because of the city that I live in, I have to protect myself. We are absolutely in a war. And so beyond that, I see a family structure. I see a family structure that often does not have both parents, that often lives without having enough to make ends meet. I see a family structure that is dysfunctional on so many fronts. I see children who end up in the system or end up at school and they have nowhere to go. There is no safe space to go back to. There is no house to nurture them that they could return to. I see youth and adults who have no places of recreation or to have a healthy living space. And I ask myself the question, and I've asked this question publicly, why can't we test every child to see if they've been exposed to lead? We have the means, but not the will. So we could test and we can look and solve that issue. And I'm grateful for some of the initiatives that have been announced recently. How is it that when I walk into a hospital, and like you rabbis, I walk into many hospitals. How is it that when I walk into hospitals that I see almost no one who looks like me? How is it that when I walk into some hospitals and I see the board of directors on the wall and I see almost no representation or no desire to have diversity or to even prime the pump so that if we're going to really get to healthcare equity, we have to have leadership at the top levels? How is it that in some of our mid-sized companies, some of our accounting firms, one of the law firms that I work with that has good diversity right now, but in many of those mid-sized firms, manufacturing companies that have no diversity in our community, when I look at that, we are absolutely at war. How is it that we have judges who are making decisions on the future of children who never walk in schools, who never walk in the neighborhoods, or never visit the homes for whom they are pronouncing judgment? And when I look at that, I absolutely believe that we are at war. So just a few other things, and I want to finish here. And we had a member of our congregation who worked for the Land Conservancy, and she prompted us to plant over 150 trees in our neighborhood because I want to connect the two. And so how is it that we live in these neighborhoods that are adjacent to many toxic areas? And so she pushed her name was Jackie Gillen, and she actually transitioned just a few months ago. And so, but she pushed us to plant those trees, and in planting those trees, most of the trees survived, and I'm grateful to see the tree of life here. And I recall standing with you when there was that tragic incident in Pittsburgh. I recall going to the Jewish Federation. They asked me to be one of the people who would speak in solidarity with you. And so as I think about the tree of life, as I think about the trees being planted, trees have to have seeds. They have to have sun. They need to be nurtured, and they have to have water. And the trees that don't survive are missing one of those elements. They're missing one of those elements. And so I'm here today because of the invitation, but I'm here more importantly to see how we can work together during this time of war. And so I appreciated the conversation with Erwin a few days ago, and he talked about what you're doing with respect to racial justice. And I really appreciate that you don't just do it this weekend and today, that you've got other dates on the calendar for this year. And I appreciate Erwin saying to me that you have a model, a template that involves learning. And so you have learning to get the history, that you also have advocacy, and you specifically talked about criminal justice, and then you talked about reciprocal relationships. If Erwin was here right now, he would laugh, because we sit in meetings together, and so sometimes when we sit in meetings together, he will facilitate it, he will have a certain thought, and then here comes Gibson. He is looking to add something to the thought. And so I would just have you to consider this as a possible addendum to your template. So I believe that the listening and the learning is absolutely important, as well as the dialogue. I believe that it's also important that we also serve together, that we roll up our sleeves, because when we actually see some of the conditions that I've talked about, and it's not just in the moment, it's not just me talking about it, it's not just me listing those statistics. Then it becomes real. We have a homeless shelter, for example, and in our homeless shelter, if we were to go there this evening, there are many moms and children who are in the midst of the toughest moment of their life. And so I believe that there are opportunities to serve together, and not opportunities that we simply identify, but that we might identify together. I also believe that it's important to go beyond advocacy to action. I believe that we should be able to decide that we can act jointly on issues, and there might be some issues where we might say we're not going to act jointly, but that we could absolutely say that we can act jointly to resolve the issues so that there's peace and love. But the other piece of it, and this, and my last thoughts here is I believe I speak for our congregation, and I can speak for Elizabeth Baptist Church, and I can speak to our commitment. And our commitment is also, in addition to the listening, the learning, the service, but I also believe that we're committed to pray with you and to serve with you. Now, that's different for us and that's different in many of the coalitions that come together, because very often we will come together and we may serve together, but there's a God whom we serve, there's a God who has the light of Shabbat Shalom. And why can't we come together to pray to God, to press into our power, to press into our collective power, and then work together? And so I'm committing for Elizabeth Baptist Church that we would absolutely come together to pray with you. And if that's the listening session for us, then we'll engage in that prayer. I want to finish with this. And so for us in our tradition, in Genesis, the 15th chapter, Adonai is having this exchange with Abram. He's having this exchange with Abram, and he's talking about what's going to happen to his heirs. And he says, step outside and look into the sky. Imagine, dream about what this could be. Dream about what this could be. Dream about what could happen. And in his mind, you just take from the text a bit that he can't see it as largely as Adonai, that he is thinking about having a child and saving a child. But Adonai is getting him to expand his thoughts, to expand his concepts. And I believe that the light that is shining today, and he says, look out, and he says that if you look at all of the stars in the sky, that your descendants will be greater than those stars. And I believe that he is saying to him that it's not in his power, just like it's not in our power. But if we come together with the power of Adonai working in us, and then he finishes this, Abram says that he believed the Lord and that it was credited to his righteousness. That it is credited to his righteousness. And I believe that there's an account that we can draw on That if we come together, if we can pray together, if we can work together, I am committed to work on quality education in our city. I am committed to, as the city of Seattle did, to end involuntary homelessness in our community. I am committed to reduce the number of guns in our community. I am committed to having quality education. I am committed to having prayer with Temple-Tifereth and others of the faith community that we can bring it together. I am committed to having diversity within our business community. I am committed to healthcare inequities, to eliminating those. I am committed to us working together. And so for me, I'm not comfortable with necessarily honoring the incredible speeches of Dr. King. And they were. I believe that if Dr. King were here today, he would advise us to spend less time on his speeches and much more time on the issues before us, because we deserve and we serve a God where we should have much more progress than we've had. Shabbat Shalom.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome. Please join us. We'll walk hand in hand. Let's sing together. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall live in peace someday.
Pastor Gibson, I would like to thank you for your extraordinary words, for moving us and from waking us to the realities of our city, of our county, of our homes, of our families. And for those of you who are watching from Elizabeth Baptist Church and from the Temple-Tifereth Israel, I want to tell you, this is not just our Martin Luther King Day Shabbat service. This is a historic moment because we will pray together and we will serve together and we will make a difference together to this community, to our families, to our homes, to our city, and to our county. And we are indebted to you this evening, this Shabbat.
At this time in our service, we turn our thoughts to those in need of healing. Those who need healing of the mind, the body, and the spirit. If at this time you are thinking of someone who is in need of healing, we ask that you share their names aloud from wherever you are. To those names we add Adriana Contino, Jim Constabile, Joan Anger, Egner, Stephanie Fullerton, Amelia Hegarty, Jack Horowitz, Maddie Jefferson, Udis Cohn, Byron Krantz, Richard Moore, Bob Shippey, and Zella Terry. Please join us for the Misha Berach prayer.
Find the courage to make our lives a blessing.
We turn to page 291. It is hard to sing of oneness when the world is not complete, when those who once brought wholeness to our life have gone, and naught but memory can feel the emptiness their passing leaves behind. But memory can tell us only what we were in company with those we loved. It cannot help us find what each of us alone must now become. Yet no one is really alone. Those who live no more echo still within our thoughts and words, and what they did is part of what we have become. We do best homage to our dead when we live our lives more fully, even in the shadow of our loss. For each of our lives is worth the life of the whole world. In each one is the breath of the ultimate one. In affirming the one, we affirm the worth of each one, whose life now ended brought us closer to the source of life, in whose unity no one is alone, and every life finds purpose. At this time in our service, we take into our hearts those who have shaped us, those upon whose shoulders we stand. We especially think of those whom we have lost and have laid to rest this week. Rita Frankel, Dr. Barbara Kaufman, Dr. Stuart Glassman, DDS, William J. Stern, and Florine Talisman. And we take into our hearts those who were laid to rest within the last 30 days, for whom we are within the Shloshim. Janet Chernin, Ted Silverberg, Dr. Ronald H. Bell, Lola Farron, Larry Glazer, Bonnie Lockshine, Paul McCann, and Marlene R. Sills. And we recall with fondness those whose yahrzeits occur at this time. Florence Abrams, Jeanette K. Edelstein, William Edelstein, Benjamin Altshuler, Jack Arsham, Ralph I. Bass, Walter L. Benjamin, Frida Burke, Stanley Robert Berland, Jerry Borovitz, Stuart I. Borovitz, Dr. Sheldon Richard Braun, Florence Miller Bromel, Nathan M. Carl, Harold Buddy Cohen, Dr. Alexander Shura Zuckerman, Lucian Zuckerman, Rachella Zuckerman, Lester Dorsey, Lisa Sue Adelsberg, Harry A. Felber, Max A. Feldman, Dr. J. Edgar Fisher, Helen Seed Frankel, Sidney N. Galvin, Paul Gold, Florence M. Goldman, Louis Goldsmith, Eugene H. Goodman, J. B. Goodman, Samuel Goulder, Eleanor K. Gross, Shirley Bass Grover, Donna B. Harris, Harry B. Himmelfarb, Philip Hirschfield, Hilda Hawkman, Mona Tobin Houston, Robert Bud Kearns, Isaac Klein, Sadie Kirshner Klein, Stella Moskowitz Cohn, Ernest Korak, Dr. Mieczysław Krongold, Helen Krongold, Joseph Krongold, Paula Krongold, Stanislaus Schlama Krongold, Jack Slampel Sr., Edith Waintrup Lefton, Dr. Irvin S. Lieberman, Sophie Lubin, Helen Reisenfeld Markowitz, Louise Marion Schwartz McDarries, Ethel Meldon, Ann Buckstein Oppenheimer, Morris W. Paley, Jennifer Langer Pinner, May M. Price, Donald Maxwell Robiner, Esther H. Rosenberg, Robert A. Rothschild, Daniel Holtzman Sachs, Rosa Schwartenberg, Helen R. Schwenger, Tilly Selzman, Teresa Siegler, Rabbi Moses Silver, Sally Sogg, Bernard J. Sperling, Sarah R. Stillman, Sylvia S. Wachtel, Martin S. Wold, Paul C. Warren, Albert S. Weiss, Mary Weitz, Elaine K. Wiesenberger, Florence Brown Wiesenberger, and Miriam Wiggins. If at this time you are mourning the passing of a loved one or the yahrzeit of a loved one whose name has not just been read, or if I mispronounced any of the names on this list, I invite you to utter the names of your loved ones now, that we may recite the Kaddish for them together.
Saul Wolf, Ross Dubell.
If at this time you are mourning the passing of a loved one whom we have lost and have laid to rest in this last week, for whom we are in the Shiva period, I invite you at this time, wherever you may be, to please rise. If you at this time are mourning the passing of a loved one whom we have lost in the last 30 days, for whom we are within the Shloshim period, I invite you now to please rise. If you are marking the yahrzeit of a loved one, I invite you now to please rise. And now, as a caring congregation, I invite all of us, wherever we are, to please rise as we prepare to recite the Kaddish on page 294. I invite you to please join me. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומייכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו, אמן יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם ולעולמי עולמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא, ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים, עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום, עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. May the source of peace and comfort bring peace and comfort to us and to all who mourn. And let us together say, Amen. Amen. You may be seated. It has become our custom in the congregation here to switch from moments of loss and mourning to moments of continued life, to moments of achievement, and to moments of celebration. We have a special Shehechianu moment on your inaugural prayer service with us, Pastor Gibson, because there are going to be many more to follow. I know that a number of us are watching, and I'm sure that Erwin is somewhere out there, as well as many others who are laughing somewhere out there and thinking what this is going to look like. But we are going to pray together, and we are going to serve together. And I would like to offer another special Shehechianu at this time to our friends, Ann and Jay Singer. Ann and Jay, I want to offer you a Shehechianu and a Mazel Tov on your 44th anniversary that's taken place on January 8th. And you will be celebrating, you are now celebrating, the near simultaneous 70th birthdays for the both of you on January 27th and 28th. So we are between January 8th and January 27th and 28th, And we've decided to celebrate now. This is our moment. So this January is a big month for Jay and Ann Singer, and I want to wish you a Mazel Tov.
Mazel tov.
Are there any other Shehecheyanu moments that we can think of right now? Well, with our best wishes for a happy Tu B'Shvat, let us join together in the Shehecheyanu.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה
Oh, is there? Oh,
Oh.
her.
It was your birthday.
Apparently I had a birthday last
You
week.
did have a birthday.
Thanks for bringing that up,
last
Rabbi
week.
Dadoon. Anyhow, yeah, I did actually,
You
Rabbi.
did, I
It
remember, yes.
happens once a year.
Happens once a year. That was this
It
last
happened.
weekend.
I'm
just
grateful for it. Very
Yes.
grateful, yes.
Mazel Tov to you.
Thank you, Rabbi. I was going to say, since we're Mazel Toving Jay and Ann Singer, we had planned, but it's even extra special now to end the service with the Adon Olam that Jay composed for
I think
our
it's a
congregation.
wonderful idea.
Just because time is of the essence, we're running a little bit behind schedule. I think we're just going to do verse 1 and verse 5.
Lovely.
Your two favorite verses.
My favorite verse.
Let's do them.
Let's do this. Now it gives me great pleasure to invite Pastor Gibson and Rabbi Dadoon to join me for the Kiddush and the Motzi.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pari hagafen Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu v'mitzvotav yiratavanu v'shabbat kodsho v'yahav ratzon hinchilanu זיכרון למעשה וראשית, כי הוא יום תחילה במקראי קודש, זכר יציאת מצרים. כי בחרת יודענו קידשת
L'chaim.
And let us bless our bounty.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom. May the source of life, the source of peace, the source of comfort, give us the strength to continue the struggle, to continue the work, to pray together and to serve together, to make a difference in the lives of our families, of our neighbors in this city, of the people of our county and the people of our country on this Shabbat and on the Shabbatot to come. And let us say, Amen.
Shir